Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out. My name is Trevor Groth. I am Director of Programming for the Film Festival, and I'm really happy to be able to introduce today's panel, the Art of Film panel, one of our Power of Story strands of programming. And I was the idea for this came to me actually when I was asked this past summer to participate in a symposium that was looking at the current and future state of film, and by film I mean actual celluloid. And I was really inspired by that conversation, and for two reasons. One, because what happened out of it for me was just reframing the conversation. For so long it's been digital versus film, and what they were trying to do at that symposium was reframe it like digital and film. Different projects are better suited for one or the other, and it would be great to always have the opportunity to have that choice. And the other thing that I took away from it was really inspired by was just hearing the artists, cinematographers and directors actually about their experience working with film and why it's so special and why they love it. And so that's why we wanted to do this conversation here tonight. We've got some distinguished guests here with us to talk about it. On the far right, coming back to the festival, is Colin Trevorrow, who is here with Safety Not Guaranteed. And went on to make a little film called Jurassic World. And he's now doing one of the new Star Wars as well. To his left is someone I first met when he was here with his film Memento. Went on to make some truly incredible studio films that prove you can have artistry and independence in a studio film. Of course, that's Christopher Nolan. And to his left is a cinematographer who's had many films here at the festival, including Dope, Fruitvale Station, and Little Accidents, Rachel Morrison. And so moderating the conversation today is a director and star actor of film Joshi here at the festival. Alex Ross Perry, who I first met, showed Impolex, a film he did at Cinevegas that I used to program. He went on to... On 35 millimeter. On 35 millimeter. And he was here also with Listen Up Philip, and he recently had Queen of Earth, which premiered at the Berlin Film Festival. So that's it. I will let them start talking about film.
All right. Make sure the mic's working. Thanks, Trevor, and thanks to everybody who asked us to come do this. I'm not a moderator by profession, so there might be a little adjustment here. But I think for the sake of this panel and the power of story and art of the story, we're not going to talk about why we like film. For the sake of this, just assume that everyone up here truly believes in it, and don't think about whether or not it's better than video or whatever. That's not what we're here for. We're all here because we feel the same way about it, or feel like it's just not, it's not either or. It's just, or it's not better than. It's, these are both different tools. So
I can't promise not to talk about why I love film. I'm just saying.
If you at some point slip into a tirade against the Alexa, I won't cut you off. Okay. I'll let that go on as long as I feel like listening to it, which will be a while. But if people were waiting for me to say, so why do you shoot on film? I will not ask that, because we're going to assume that everybody would say, because I like it, and because it's better, or because it's appropriate for the film. So talking about story, let's just start by talking about, the use of it as the canvas of a piece and the effect it has on storytelling. Because for me, and I've said this about my own low-budget films, it's the biggest and only special effect that I have on movies that don't cost very much money. And it's part of the aesthetic. It's not a technical choice. It's not a budgetary choice. It's the same as the costumes people are wearing. For me, it's part of what the movie is. And that's, to me, an interesting thing that we can all talk about, is why you feel drawn to it. And Colin has recently shot a small movie on film, and Rachel has worked on movies, on film for budgets similar to what I've done. And you're fanatical about not wanting to give video a kind word here, and I've never shot on it, which I have not either. So yeah, let's just start by talking about the value of it as part of creating the movie that you want people to see. Colin?
Yeah, I mean, so this, the small film, it's certainly a lot larger than my first film, which was very small. It was a $10 million movie that we just shot this fall called The Book of Henry. And the choice for us came down to wanting the audience to feel a certain thing, and the feeling of this movie is very timeless, and it tells what feels like a very old story. And I do tend to, the only, if we're going to have any kind of conversation about film versus digital, the only place where I tend to not be able to attach myself entirely to something shot digitally is when that's a period film. There's something in my brain that immediately says, well, they didn't have video cameras then, and they couldn't do that. And this film is not a period film, but it does feel like it takes place in a time that you can't quite put your finger on. And we found it, even as we're cutting it right now, there is a sense to the importance of every shot, and there's things that maybe if they were digital that we might allow, that because they're on film we have to honor it and make it film worthy. And so that's where it comes for me is not so much how film looks, but how film feels, and how it tends to remind us of our memories. Of our childhoods, the way we used to see films, and so it was important for me, certainly for this one.
And you shot Jurassic World on film, which you...
We shot Jurassic 35 and 65. We shot The Book of Henry is actually 3 perf 2-to-1, and Jurassic World was 2-to-1 also, and for 2 different reasons.
Should we explain what that means?
Yeah, so 2-to-1 is an aspect ratio in between 1:8:5 and scope, and in Jurassic. It was something that Vittorio Storaro first introduced as a medium between flat and scope, and we felt with Jurassic that it allowed for us to have humans and dinosaurs in the frame. All the other Jurassic movies had been 1:8:5, and yet I wanted a scope to the film, and so we found a balance right in between. And then when we went to do The Book of Henry, the 3 perf choice was a little bit of a political, I want to shoot on film, and here's a way that you can, save 25% on costs of stock and processing to make it go down a little easier when we were pitching out how to do this film. And the 2-to-1, it's something that John and I felt very comfortable with, and we like. It allows us to, it's a human drama, but that turns into a suspense thriller. And so for the first half of the movie, it's nice to be able to have that sense of a 1:8:5 intimate human drama, and then as we get into the suspense thriller side, to be able to play with the scope a little bit more. So, but these, in the end, these are all artistic choices, they're creative choices, and I feel like what is most important to me about film is that people have the choice to use it. It's not that I would say one should do this or one should do the other. You don't go to the symphony to hear the Stradivarius, you go to hear the violinist, and if the violinist is going to choose the best possible violin, of course they will. I choose to shoot with the best possible violin.
Great. I'm glad I was going to make you reuse that comparison that you told me the other day, because I think it's apt. I've always, it's about, was this a fight for you when you said we were trying to convince them to let us shoot this way? Who were you? I try not to dare tell you not to shoot on film?
Look, people will say no all the time to a lot of things. This happened to be a great experience and a very collaborative one. It wasn't necessarily a fight. It was us trying to make a movie that wouldn't necessarily, be able to be made at this budget. It's still, $10 million for a movie that is, essentially a human drama with, Naomi Watts and several children that also, involves murder. Is not the easiest sell, and as a filmmaker, I want to continue to challenge myself and to take risks. And one of the benefits when you make a giant corporation more than $1 billion is you can say, hey, like, this is something that I care about. I'm going to take all of the chips that I have and slide them back on the table and take another risk. And in the end, I am an independent filmmaker. That's who and what I am. And part of me coming to terms with making larger films and trying to infuse that sensibility into those larger films is to be able to go back and continue to challenge myself and honestly make the films that I feel I should have made between Safety Not Guaranteed and Jurassic World. I think there were a couple movies in the middle that were skipped over, but I feel like now I've earned the ability to go back and fill in the gap.
You skipped Star Wars 9 to make Jurassic World. Now you're gonna circle back around.
I didn't get to skip that one, but and that one, and so I feel, that Star Wars gets back to my issue about shooting digital for period films. Like I could never shoot Star Wars on anything but scope 35 and 65 because it's a period film. It happened a long time ago.
There you go. Chris, you spoke very eloquently to me the other day about, the purpose of the medium and the value it has on the stories you're telling in a grand scale, more so than anything I've ever dreamt.
Well, one of the things that came out of the symposium that Trevor was referring to in his introduction, it was a symposium we did at the Getty Center with Tacita Dean, who's an artist who works on 16mm film, and she was able to bring to bear a number of really compelling arguments from the art world that are unanswerable and incredibly important to do with what they call medium specificity, which is to say, if you're working on film, then it needs to be shown on film the same way that a gallery can't put up a print of a Picasso and say that they're showing you the Picasso. So if something is digitized and then shown digitally, it has to be considered a translation of the work. So as far as exhibition goes, it's something that's very important in the art world. It's very important film history and in the film world as well. But what it started to bring out is the idea of film not as a technology, because technologies are superseded. Technologies are, something else comes along and then they're dropped. It's not a technology, it's a medium. And as a medium, it has things like medium specificity. If you make a film on film and you want it shown on film, that needs to be supported and respected. But also the concept of medium resistance. Medium resistance in the art world is if you like to sculpt with clay as opposed to carving marble, there are reasons for that to do with how that medium feeds back your creative process. And as I heard Tacita talk about this so eloquently, it suddenly occurred to me that that's absolutely true of film. And one of the reasons, you talk about from a storytelling point of view, we're sort of back to a situation which, when I was in college, I was running the Film Society, and we shared a basement with the Video Society. So there's film, there's video, and we all did our thing, and we all worked in these very different ways. And one of the things that the video guys would do, that the film guys would do differently, is they would just run a lot of takes, a lot of, they'd wind up with 10 takes of something where something was kind of wrong with every take. And the film guys, because we put all our money in 16mm film and we could hear the money running through the projector, there'd be this magical moment where everything had to work perfectly. And that expectation and that energy is the medium speaking back to you. It's literally hearing the film run through the camera and everybody on set knowing, oh shit, this is it. This is the moment we have to do the thing. And that gives you a creative energy that affects the storytelling process. And it's very different to when you shoot on video. And there are guys, there are filmmakers, video makers working on video who embrace the looseness, the fluidity of it, wonderfully. But it has to be recognized that it's different, and it's a different process. And so for me, that focus on the storytelling of that particular shot in that particular moment is very, very much informed by the fact that it's being laid down as light onto celluloid photochemically, and that speaks to the storytelling in every aspect.
Yeah, I've always felt that I still don't understand how that works. That is a process to me that I would define as magic. Yeah. Whereas I understand how you press a button on a video camera and it records onto a chip. That makes perfect sense to me. And I've never even thought about I never thought about why. But there's just something so ephemeral about light and lenses that is so a part of the medium. And you're talking about Tacita Dean, and upstairs I mentioned, another filmmaker, Ben Rivers, who's British-based, who works in 16 and develops in his bathtub. And we were saying, when we spoke, for me, I've noticed there's a lot of artists, you say the word artists, working in short form on film, and here I was asking upstairs if there were films in competition or in Next that were shot on film, and I believe I was told no, or if there was one, they couldn't think of it. And you go to a Rotterdam film festival, where I believe Following played.
Yeah.
And there's probably a dozen, 24, 30 short form pieces being projected on 8mm or 16mm. And that, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but hopefully there's not going to be the perception of this endless divide where people think this is just for art, and that if you want to make entertainment, then you don't do that. If you want to work on 16, you go make a 5-minute loop and you play it in a gallery, and if you want to make a
well, and part of the reason for that, and one of the reasons I'm here today, and thrilled to hear that Colin just shot a relatively small film on film, and looking at your work and how efficiently that was made on film for an incredible price. The most important message that needs to get out there right now is this artificial industrial distinction that's been made, that shooting on video is of the future and is practical and is the way forward. Shooting on film is impractical and is the past, and it's simply not the case. It needs to be a choice ongoing into the future. And we've made a strong effort to reframe the discussion over the last couple of years in terms of, there's no point in sitting debating resolutions, all the rest, color reproduction. There's no point in endlessly comparing the two media. You just have to say they're different. And it's very, very important that young and new filmmakers, new talent at places like Sundance or Rotterdam, people coming into the business, understand that they should shoot the film the way they want to shoot it. And film is absolutely available, and it's completely practical for them to do so. And the relentless amount of disinformation that's been around, particularly in the last 10 years, talking about why there must be this inevitable shift towards video, it does have to be countered to a degree. So there is a certain amount still of that. You have to stand up for the truth and for what you know to be true in the medium you work in. And I'm in a very, very privileged position of, over the last 10 years, getting to work with film and the digital translation of film and video cameras. We've been comparing them every week, pretty much every day for months at a time. And so I have a very specific insight into it. And I hear a lot of things that simply aren't true and need to be countered. And the main one being, when you casually refer to, Ben Rivers processing film in his bathtub, it's extremely important because, the first thing is, there are no labs left. And there are labs all over the place. There's 2 labs in England. There's a great lab, Photochem in Los Angeles, And by the way, you can process film in your bathtub if you really want to. Elias Merg used to do that. It's completely doable.
If it's important to the work, and if that's part of your tools, then it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And so the point is, as a medium, it will continue to exist and has to continue to exist. And it's pointless to pretend that it isn't and that it has to go away, so that a generation of new filmmakers coming in don't get to experiment with it, if that's what they want to do. So really, it's important to make the argument for choice and communicate the possibilities that are out there for filmmakers now.
Yeah. Rachel, do you have these problems with people telling the films you've shot, they can't be shot on film? Or you mentioned Fruitvale was Super 16, Little Accidents, 35. Is this a fight at these small levels, as I've sort of had in my own small way?
I mean, it is with the producers. I think you definitely, in my case, I need to have the director on board. Whether I recommend it or they recommend it to begin with, it's something where we both have to really believe in it. As a DP, it's not enough for me to say we should shoot on film. We really need the director going to bat for it as well. Yeah. But I think there's so many advantages, and it really is story dependent. I think what these guys have been speaking to about it being a choice is so relevant, for a number of reasons. Like for me, I equate film with humanity, and for the most part, I tell these dramatic, very humane stories, and there's this tactile, sort of subtextual, subconscious quality that comes inherently from film. Can you achieve some extent of that digitally in post? Maybe, but often that requires so much money that the same people who couldn't afford to spend it on film in the first place aren't going to, dedicate enough money to then spend time to do it right in post. But the biggest thing for me when it comes to choices is there's so many things you can do with film that you can't do with digitally. It's not just about grain. It's about you can push process, you can pull process, you can bleach bypass, you can flash a negative, you can throw the shutter out of whack, and it gives so many more options to me as a storyteller, and therefore the directors, the stories to be told, that, I think it's incredibly valuable to not just think of it as film or, grain, but it's really within film, there's, it opens up a world of possibility. And then, one other thing I would say, speaking of what Chris mentioned, the idea of it, okay, costing a certain amount of money running through the gate, it does really up the stakes, and it also allows oftentimes for a much more single camera medium, which as a DP, it allows you to put the camera in the right place. There's this sort of tendency I'm finding, in the last few years, as cameras become less expensive, to throw more cameras at the problem. We're going to shoot, instead of doing a project in 30 days with one camera, we're going to do it in 20 days with two. And effectively, you end up doing these sort of slightly compromised, hopefully you're doing this and not this. But if you are doing this, you're still, you're slightly compromising the eye line on one of those shots. And so there's something really nice that film also lends itself to a single camera medium as much as possible. And that, for me, is really invaluable, because when you tell a story that's about humanity, you want to have control of your eye line. That's, incredibly important, so.
Yeah, you mentioned, you're talking about the options you have with film, and I know we've all spoken about this, and you were talking about us kind of coming out now of a pretty dark 10-ish years, 5 years of disinformation and the options getting smaller. And I'm curious if everybody thinks, as I know you've been saying, that perhaps we are moving past that and now it's time to turn the narrative around in the press where people say one thing, and perhaps we're returning to a time where we're going to be seeing more film stocks introduced. And we were just, recently Kodak announced plans for Super 8 camera to be brought back into the marketplace, and I know you were about to speak with someone about that when we talked last week. And
yeah, no, I took a look at the prototype. It looks terrific. It's a new Super 8 camera that Kodak is introducing at CES, and it's incredibly exciting because it's exactly that. I started off shooting Super 8 films. That was my entry into filmmaking, and having the physical film, being able to put it on a projector, throw it up, on a wall in your living room or whatever. There's something to that medium that's very, very unique that there isn't a video equivalent for. Now, there are plenty of very cool things that video technology enables young people coming to movies to do that I wasn't able to do. But I would hate for kids today and new filmmakers coming in to not be able to do the things I was able to do and experience the relationship with the intervening medium of film that I was. Because, I know, we said we don't want to talk too much about comparisons, but it's a little difficult not to in certain areas, because if you're asking me to say what it is about film that moves me or that guides me, I think that for me, it's always had a very tactile sense of the intervening medium. It's always felt like, when I watch Fruitvale Station, it's carved in oak as opposed to being, stenciled on plywood. That's the difference to me. It's like video has a fluidity to it that I don't know where the authoritative version of it's going to be. I don't know where it's going to land. I don't know where the thing's going to exist. I feel that as I watch films. I feel that it's authoritative, that it's been inscribed, that it's finished and it's done, and that the filmmakers put all their eggs into that basket. And that's a powerful emotional feeling of the way in which I watch other people's films and the way in which I try to make my own. And I think for me that started with Super 8. We used to, you'd shoot your 3-minute rolls, and then you'd send it to the photo mat, and you'd wait 2 weeks for it to come back. And the excitement after 2 weeks of like, well, what did we do? That was really, really thrilling.
Yeah, well, and now for me, and I'm sure you've experienced this on smaller movies, and the excitement on set when 2 days later on a low-budget movie where you're only dropping things off once in a while, when you finally get day one's footage back and it's the lunchtime on day 3. Yeah. Everybody drops what they're doing, and there's just this celebration of everyone huddling around the computer and looking at these downloadable dailies and just even holding your breath. And that, to me, is so exciting. Much more so than this fear that the zeros and ones of your images might just disappear if someone spills a cup of coffee on a hard drive.
Well, and the thrill, being able to print the film and screen dailies, which is what I do. It's a remarkable thing to sit there with all your collaborators, with creative collaborators, and see the film up there, the way it's going to project for the audience. It's a very valuable part of the process, and it really all comes down to this idea of focus and what the medium gives me and my collaborators' extreme focus in all areas of, what's going in front of that camera. It's very interesting what you said about the single camera approach, because I hadn't really thought of it in those terms, but I've always shot everything I do single camera except for stunts or unrepeatable things where you need to do all your angles at the same time. But having one camera in the right place as opposed to two cameras in slightly the wrong place, it's a really important part of focus. And when you work in studio films, there's all kinds of pressure on new directors to shoot in a particular way. They'll tell you to use Steadicam because it's quicker than laying track. Things, all these kind of quite arbitrary things. And what's happened over the last 10 years is one of those things has become you can't shoot on film. And what you need as a filmmaker is you need a team around you. You need line producers and UPMs who understand that it's an important creative choice and they can balance the figures and make the budget work fine. It isn't any more expensive to shoot on film. It's one of those things that's been put out there that just isn't true. Budgets of studio movies aren't coming down, they're going up. It's not, the bigger picture is it's up to the filmmakers, the directors, producers in collaboration to figure out where that money gets spent and what it is they want to do. And a great UPM or a great line producer can really help you do that and give you that choice.
Yeah, and part of what Rachel said when we spoke before was, part of this in convincing people of that will have to be moving towards a place where the film stocks are truly doing things that digital is not, which obviously we already believe they do, but not everybody does. Everybody says you can just fake it and you can replicate these images, and you spoke about, this exciting hope that we have that something like reversal stock could come back and no one could say you can fake reversal on a digital camera because you can't. Nothing looks like film shot on reversal anymore. And if that came back, then that wouldn't be a money decision. That would be a true conversation about the way the movie's going to look, not about which equipment you're using.
Well, and my secret hope, and since I have a forum to say as much, Kodak, if you're out there, is to bring back some of the older stocks. I think what's happened is now there's only, because of the supply and demand is what it is, there's only a select number of stocks to choose from, and they tend to be the stocks that were developed sort of looking towards more resolution and more latitude. But in some ways, it's the older stocks that had more visible grain, less latitude, that really have a very distinct look. So, I don't know if this is possible, but the idea of being able to batch select a stock, you guys, maybe not in my world, but if you guys wanted to create a stock for a film and to go back to the pre-Vision days or Vision 1 days and really choose some things that don't look anything like digital, that would be my perfect world.
Could you guys do that?
Yeah.
No, I've been talking to Kodak about modifications to stocks relating to specific products. It's all a conversation that's perfectly possible to have. At the end of the day, the T-grain stocks, the Vision stocks, they're built to mimic the way the eye sees incredibly well. And specifically, it's certainly true that video technology that's been what it's been chasing the whole time. So yes, at a superficial reading, they may seem more similar, but it's a little hard to argue the toss when you talk to the chemists and engineers at Kodak when they talk about the way in which the response curves will change and whatever. If you're looking for, I'm always looking for naturalism, and so that's very much the way these stocks have been developed. So they're kind of the best they've ever been, which is worth pointing out because even though I have a certain amount of nostalgia for some of the older stocks, and particularly reversal, but I think I would have to say, hand on heart, the stocks they make now, they're the best they've ever been in 100 years of cinema. They're incredible. And they're as fast as you need. They've got a 500 ASA. They dropped the 800 ASA they had 10 years ago because people found it too grainy because at the time, and we've talked to them about potentially reintroducing that. It's all possible as a discussion. But at the end of the day, they make a fantastic 500 ASA stock that you can push a stop if you want to have 1,000 ASA and shoot with wide open lenses. It's an incredibly versatile medium for mocking the way that the eye sees nature.
Mm-hmm.
Something that frustrates me a little bit is how very recently film has sort of been pushed into the realm of the elite, where no one has access to it. And that's, I learned on film at NYU. I was at NYU in '99, and we were talking, I guess you were a little bit later, and they still, in the first class, in Sight and Sound, they still do film, even today?
Well, I don't know about today.
No, today.
I think the first class...
At NYU, yeah. And so, we were on Steam, we were cutting on
yeah.
film, and I think that not only does that, it gives you a respect for the shot, it gives you a respect for the edit, But when you talk about the Super 8 camera, I was looking at that and I got all excited. I'm like, I'm gonna get one of these for my kids, and we're gonna go and I'm gonna teach them how to. And I looked at the cost of each one of those reels of film, and it's like, okay, well, there's a democratization that digital brought to filmmaking, where anyone anywhere can get their hands now, on an iPhone, on a video camera, and make a film. And there's something I think that's part of the struggle with film right now, is that because of the costs that are incurred by trying to shoot, even just for someone, a kid at their home who wants to learn. It makes it that much more difficult for everybody to have the opportunity to do it. And to me, it actually puts a little bit of the responsibility on film schools, because they've got a lot of money. And people, we pay a lot of money to go to these schools.
They do, and they've all dropped the ball on this. There are very few. The National Film and Television School in London, graduate films are still done on film.
Yeah.
There are various, I think, New York Film Academy. But a lot of the big guys, they have to be shamed back into it, because the idea that you charge people what you charge with tuition, and I didn't go to film school, so it's easy for me to rail about it. It's like the idea that you charge that to get some camera that you could buy for half of one semester's tuition. It's.
Well, you're not really teaching that this is one of the choices.
No, you're not. You're not teaching it's one of the choices. You're also not teaching the discipline, the underlying discipline that the entire film industry is based on, because we still mix in reels. We still count feet and frames. We still, even if you're shooting digitally, you have to understand how an Avid works, to understand how all the latest digital technology that applies to film works. You're much better off as part of your education if you understand how film works, because that's where it's all come from. And so the film schools really do have to gear up with that. I mean, to speak to your point about the democratization of video technology, that's absolutely true. It is worth pointing out, though, that what the studios have done in the last few years is applied the consumer economics of that to larger scale production, which is facile. It's complete nonsense. They're just, that's where the disinformation comes in. The idea that, as you say, it's more expensive to shoot Super 8 than it is to use your phone, to record something. Absolutely true. But if you think you're going to make your, $100 million film cheaper because you shoot it on digital, it's absurd. It's completely untrue. No. And that's the thing that has to be kind of put out there, because my hope, when you think of young people coming up, is these kids who are making videos using whatever's to hand, which is what we did when we were kids, but I'm old enough that what was to hand was my dad's Super 8 camera. That if these kids then get the chance to play the Stradivarius, if they have the cheap violin and they learn how to be a really good violinist, that somebody doesn't say, this is the thing, is when I came to do my first sort of budgeted film, we were spending millions of dollars. It was because those don't exist anymore, or whatever. That which was Memento, and we spent, I think we had about $3 million to make the film. One of the first things I found out was we weren't going to print dailies, because at the time the wisdom was, you take a negative, you telecine it, you look at your dailies on video. And I'd come from making a $6,000 film before that, where we looked at our dailies on film, whatever. And I was appalled, and had the conversation with the line producer, and she rearranged the numbers. And these struggles have been around forever. The interesting thing that I think is misunderstood about the way this has developed is it suppressed some things that you should work out so that we could do select takes. Not everything, but we would see some of what we were doing every day on film. Surprising for people to realize that the first time I had to justify shooting film, like the first time this conversation happened, where it's like, okay, why do you want to do it on film? Why didn't you just do it on video? Was on my first film in the 90s. This is how long this conversation has been going on. And it was, as hard to justify then in other than in emotional terms as it is now. You just say, but this is what I want to do. So that the fight's been around, forever in those terms. And so it's always that tension between what you feel you want to do as a creative individual and what you're bringing to it as a director, and then finding the team around you who can support that and understand the importance of those choices.
A lot of it might have to do with how you were brought up and what was around you. Because my mother was a photographer and she developed film in our laundry room, and I got to feel it and touch it and see film go in the bath and understand that. And I'm kind of actually the opposite of you in that I don't understand how the images go on the computer chip. I don't know how that works. That makes no sense to me. Whereas light hitting film and then putting more light through it and having an image projected on a screen, I completely get that in my brain.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that I don't get it. It's just that I choose to not care about it.
No idea how the computer works.
But yeah, I mean, there was like a quote about this when I don't know if you saw the Leos Carax film Holy Motors 3 or 4 years ago. It's his first film shot digitally, and someone said, "What camera did you shoot it on?" He said, "I didn't shoot it on a camera. We shot on a computer." And he said when Escoffier, his DP, died, he said, "I don't know anyone else who can shoot film the way he does, so I don't know how to do it anymore." But yeah, to me, that kind of feels like it's just a computer thing. But not to get sidetracked, talking about Holy Motors, but
that exists everywhere, though. I mean, that idea. I mean, we used to talk, even in Jurassic World, like this can't look like two computers fighting. Like that was always what we kept repeating to ourselves, and that debate goes into the use of animatronics, the use of practical effects. Like I feel like there's a link between all of these things, this film versus digital, practical versus creating these images in a computer. There has been a movement back toward a lot of these analog practices, and my biggest frustration is that it tends to fall into the realm of the guys on Mount Olympus, of who can JJ can make these choices because of where he's at, and where does that leave everybody else who really want to be making the same kinds of choices, but aren't able to because of this idea that digital costs less.
Well, this is a relevant point, and also something that I think we can all speak to, and I think part of why I was asked to do this, because there has to be something that exists in between Star Wars, Interstellar, and the movies that I've made and that you've made that play at festivals like this, and there is this vast divide, and you speak a lot about misinformation. And I think in the eyes of most people, if there is misinformation and if people are told that this is cheaper and harder, then the only thing they hear is Hateful Eight's on film, your movies are released on film if you want them to be, and they're shot on film. And then they don't know that there's this world beneath them of movies being made for $1 million less, a little bit more. I made 2 films before Listen Up Philip, which played here in the realm of the budget of following $15,000 and $20,000, both on film, and we made sacrifices to do that. But there does seem to be this big gap, and this fits into the misinformation thing you talk about, where anybody says you can't afford it. I made 2 movies under $1 million on Super 16 in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's not just for you and no. J.J. Abrams, and part of what you said you were interested in coming here is just to make sure that if we're combating misinformation, it's just about being really vocal about it, and it's become something that I end up talking about in every interview because it's a huge fun thing to talk about for people, and it's a selling point of my movies, and it's a selling point of any independent movie that you've worked on, because it'll be one of 10 at a festival that's shot that way, or the only one. And just I'm interested in how you feel that how to fill in the gap between people saying, well, of course you can shoot on film, but how can I? Because I can answer that, but I feel like most people still don't know that.
No, well, I mean, I think this panel is part of the answer. I think hearing you speak about it is a very important part of the answer, and I think it speaks to your desire as well. I mean, the fact that you're here talking about it in these terms, it tells people something, and the fact that you're able to point to a film you just made for under $200,000, it's 16 mil. I mean, you look at Carol this year, Todd Haynes' marvelous film, and it's one of the most stunning-looking films I've ever seen. Super 16, Ed Luckman, I mean, incredible work. So just letting people know that, I felt a few years ago, I felt like when most of the projectors in the world sort of became, digital projectors, that at that point, this sort of corporate, unintentional conspiracy around it, the sort of push to kill film, because there has been a very strong push over the last years. Unintentional conspiracy. When you say conspiracy, it sounds like everybody sits in a room and whatever, and it's like, no, of course not. But there's been well, I'll give you the example that I would point to is Quentin, worked his arse off to shoot a fantastic movie on 65 mil and do a 70 mil rollout of it, and it worked tremendously well. The film looks incredible. For those of you who haven't seen it on 70, I mean, it's really wonderful to look at. He had one press screening where there was a problem with one of the lenses, and so they switched to the DCP after the interval. And I spoke to a couple of people who were in the screening who said, yeah, the DCP didn't even look as good as the slightly wrong projection, the 70mm print beforehand. Press sort of held this up as some kind of, oh, you see, you don't know what you're talking about. You see, you shouldn't have done this on film. I mean, it's ludicrous. As opposed to, this is a filmmaker who's struggled very hard, worked very hard to really push something out there in the world to entertain people, to give them the best possible experience, and should be celebrated for that. But as soon as there's some little technical hitch, it's as if it's his fault. Like, he built the projector. Like, I had the same experience myself on one of the IMAX films I'd made, where there had been a press screening and the digital sound had gone out of sync with the picture, and then people asked me about it. I'm like, I'm the director, I'm not the projectionist. Like, these things happen. But there's a culture around wanting to kill film, whereby any little hiccup like that happens all the time in the digital world, is pointed to as some kind of proof of something. Or, I hear it now from people who've gone, who liked film but went digital. They'll talk about, oh, there are more stock defects, there are this, there are that. None of which is true. I mean, I've been shooting film my entire career. In the last couple of years, I've shot Super 8, 16mm, 3 perf 35, 4 perf 35, 4 perf 35 anamorphic, 5 perf 65mm, 15 perf 65mm, all in the last couple of years. Zero stock defects, no problems whatsoever. Best lab work we've ever had. That's the reality of where the film world is like, you can get incredible work done. Mm-hmm. Are there problems in it? Of course there are problems in it.
And people are excited to say, this problem would never happen with the DCP.
Yeah, I mean, I did,
very eager to say that.
I'll give you the example. I did 2 DGA screenings this year for other filmmakers. One was on film, one was digital. The film screening went perfectly. The digital one, the projector broke down, 10 minutes of black, really hurt the momentum of the film. It was very unfortunate. It just happens, But I never heard that spoken about. I never, because it's not of interest to people. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean about an unintentional conspiracy. I'm just talking about a culture that's grown up around, we've got to kill the way things are, we've got to kill the status quo in order to usher in the new thing, which is no longer necessary. There's a degree of aggression that you understand accompanies a wide rollout of needing to, put out new projectors or whatever. But at the point at which that's happened, that need ceases, and we can all be grown up and responsible and try and give filmmakers the choice that they should have. Mm-hmm. And that's where the conversation needs to go now, and it needs to go there for new filmmakers, for lower budget filmmakers, and it's very important.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking briefly about, you're talking about presentation and, the symphony comparison. When I go see a film projected on 35, I have great respect for the projectionist, and I feel like I'm watching a live performance where anything could happen. And when I'm watching something that someone probably pressed the button on and walked away, I don't feel that way. There's a kind of excitement and a spontaneity, and the thing is alive, and it's never looked exactly the way it looks right now, and it'll never look that way again, and everything will be slightly different, and that's exciting.
No, it's a performance. It's something we talk to the exhibitors about a lot, about wanting to do 70mm presentation or IMAX film presentation or whatever. It's about showmanship. It's about putting on a show for the audience, and the exhibitors have to be our partners with that. Mm-hmm. And film is a fantastic way to do that. It has no defining resolution. You can't compare it with your 2K TV or your 4K TV. It's a very unique and distinctive thing. And that has to be embraced and celebrated, not somehow this sort of consumer desire that's crept in that everything should be the same everywhere. The film should be identically presented everywhere, even if that means it's presented worse. It's what I call the kind of McDonald's approach. It's like, yeah, it's all a bit worse, but it's exactly the same everywhere you see it. It's like, yeah, but can't we have a little fine dining at the top of that pyramid somewhere?
You were comparing filmmaking to McDonald's upstairs earlier as well.
I do sometimes. I would say, well, that's not, it's a different subject, but I was saying how you can, with something like Jurassic, you can make something that is completely insane at first blush until it becomes McDonald's. And then it just feels normal. And that's one of the great things about, making big movies is that you can do things that, that when you watch a trailer of a guy on a motorcycle with a bunch of raptors, you're like, well, that's crazy. And then it, the audience accepts it, and suddenly it's like, well, that's just what happened. Of course, what else would you do? What else would one do? And yet, the thing that, I don't know, I think the thing that is good, just to talk about a positive development that Kodak is doing, and they've been very proactive as far as making it possible for younger filmmakers and new filmmakers who don't have the money, is by we actually developed in a mobile lab. The Book of Henry was the first movie to use the Alpha Lab, which Kodak created a full processing lab in a giant trailer that's able to drive anywhere in the country. And they drove it to New York, and we processed out of this lab, which was parked in Queens, and now I think it's somewhere else. And the ability, I mean, as the labs go away, and it makes it, everything gets that sense of inaccessibility grows. And I think that's the biggest issue. Like I don't like couching things as a fight. Like I think there is a collaboration. I think any studio who decides to make a movie, if you're going to put millions of dollars into a movie, you believe in that movie, and there's a want for that movie to be good. And I think if we can go to the financiers of our films and very earnestly and proactively say, look, here are some things that we can do to make this work for you. I'm going to shoot on 3perf. That's 25% off processing and 25% less stock right away. You don't want to ship everything back to LA to have it developed. We've Kodak has provided us with this mobile lab, and I think as Kodak continues to work toward it, and I think as other filmmakers try to be as proactive as possible, to find ways to make it possible at the not just sub $100 million level. Our movie's $10 million, and how much? I mean, God, how much was Fruitvale Station?
Fruitvale was under 100, probably 650,000.
Under 100 million?
Right. Oh, no, sorry, it was under $1 million.
And which is also under 100 million.
Right.
Exactly.
Also true.
You got to fudge the numbers a little bit.
Exactly.
Keep people on their toes.
Totally. But yeah, I mean, that was a conversation with Ryan, and we really went through about, how many takes. We felt like we figured out exactly what our shooting ratio was going to be. I think there might have been a crew member sacrificed in the deal, instead of a 3-and-3 crew.
Not literally sacrificed.
Not literally sacrificed.
Whatever it takes, man.
Yeah.
But you make compromises.
Yeah.
So less lights, smaller crew, make that work in that way, or occasionally it's a day, but you have to figure out where those compromises are going to be made, and if it's worth it to you, you fight for them.
Well, and that's where a great line producer really helps you out.
And they
a
just have
bad
to
one
do
doesn't.
it, yeah.
It's like, well, because all filmmaking is intelligent compromise. That's the whole process we go through. You never have enough. I mean, Colin will be able to vouch for this. No matter what your budget is, you never have enough time. You never have enough money. You're in the. It's weird when you're doing a huge film. You're in the same position you were when you were doing a tiny film. You're always, and there's a good reason for that. You're always trying to get as much on screen as you possibly can. And so whatever the box that's built for you by the economics of the project, you're always trying to push up against those walls. And so you need help from your team in terms of how you arrange things and how you make that work. But
yeah, I feel like. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to. I mean, do you? I wonder sometimes if at least to me, like. Film helps me believe that the thing I'm watching actually happened in a way that digital doesn't, and I think that
suspension of disbelief.
Suspension of disbelief, and just as I was mentioning, with the Raptors and the motorcycles, like when you're talking about these kinds of movies where you're presenting people things that obviously aren't happening in our real world, to present it on film, I feel like it just does something to your brain and to your ability to suspend that disbelief, because it doesn't feel like it was made inside a computer. It feels like, well, the light bounced off those Raptors and traveled in here and now is it hit the silver, and that's the, I don't know, there's I definitely struggle not just with period films that are shot on digital, as far as feeling like that they were real and part of my memories. And it doesn't, I feel like when I think of my dreams, they were on film. My dreams are shot on film.
Yeah.
No, I think suspension of disbelief is a huge part of it. I mean, we're meant to be talking about storytelling as part of this, and I think I've noticed the same thing Colin's noticed, which is when I see something shot on film, and particularly projected on film as well, that process of suspension of disbelief is much more effective for me, and I think that's true for audiences as well. And I think a lot of the money and effort that goes into post-production on video films is achieving that suspension of disbelief, rather than, you don't often see films that have been shot on video where you get kind of the raw feed, where you get really the way that that medium looks, because filmmakers are a little afraid of it. They tend to want to make it feel more like film because there is this indefinable assist that it gives you with the suspension of disbelief. And what you bump up against in a storytelling sense as a filmmaker is the inherent artifice of what it is we do. We aim at naturalism. We feel like we're much more naturalistic than, you know, the filmmakers of the 1920s or whatever, but we're not. We're dealing in artifice. We're dealing in theatrical ideas and the way they're written. And even though you aim at that naturalism, you're always telling the story in the time you're in and with the devices and the accepted conventions that you have. And for me, film is an incredibly important tool in the storytelling toolkit to allow the audience access to that, to allow them the terms of the storytelling and just dive in and accept your, you know, Raptors and motorbikes or whatever. Yeah. I also think it's worth pointing out, because obviously we're talking about bigger films we do, I think that issue is even more important for small films.
I mean, that's how I feel. I know we spoke about that, and I'd like to hear you speak on this, but yeah, I mean, I feel, you know, for my 6-figure movies, you don't have every tool that you might have on a Jurassic World, but this is really the only tool I need to, in the first 30 seconds of the movie, have people say, oh, this takes place in the world of cinema. Like this movie is artificial. There's lighting, there's cutting, there's music, and I know that because this feels so alive in that way that you know, that kind of the disbelief does. And to me, it's the best asset I've had on distinguishing the look and feel of very small films. And you don't have the ability to go back and fix stuff or reshoot things later or stitch things together. You really, it's just, if you have 20 days, that's all you've got. And if you're shooting it one way, then those 20 days will, I think, look very dramatically different.
Well, it feels committed. That's what I felt watching a film. It feels very committed. And that, as an audience member, brings me into it.
To be clear, he's talking about my film.
I was.
just so as long as we're on the record. But yeah, I'd love to hear you speak about this. And, you know, the decisions you make, sorry, I'll just phrase this. It's so much fun to make those decisions for me. I mean, I love when you're like, we can only do this one more time. Yeah. That's my favorite take of the day, when it's like, we're out, like we're done with, we can't keep shooting right now.
And everybody knows that it's game on. I think that's sort of what you were speaking to. I mean, I would say two things. One is I completely agree that there's an inherent authenticity that you just immediately buy into. And I would even say that there's an inherent empathy. And so much of what we're doing is about creating an experience where, you know, the whole objective is to put the audience in our main characters' shoes, or, you know, if it's an ensemble cast, plural main characters, but to create a subjective experience. And so if you can help the audience to empathize in any way, like what better tool could you ask for? And then just to speak to the intimacy of it, you know, there's something that's really special that happens both when you're shooting single camera, but also when you're shooting film. I find that the director ends up standing right next to me, and they're having this really immediate experience with the actors and looking at the actors in real life. And I feel like that translates to where, you know, you have, when you have Video Village and it's a mile away, and everybody's weighing in because they think that they're gauging the real, you know, they're seeing something on the monitor that they think is the final image. Yeah. And so you have, you know, if there's one hair out of place, people can see it, and somebody's running in to adjust a hair, and that affects the actor. And I think when on our budgets, when you shoot film and you have a very poor quality monitor, people kind of let you do your thing.
Best. They don't work at all, so nobody even bothers with that.
Totally.
Yeah.
A Super 16 tap into a monitor looks like scrambled pornography from the 80s. And it keeps people away from where the fun is happening.
And you know, for a medium that already tends to have too many cooks in the kitchen, I think it's really special when you get to have a small, intimate set where it's, you know, me, the director, the talent, and that's kind of it. I mean, the focus puller, the boom operator, and that's it.
Well, it's shocking to me, actually, that cinematographers haven't defended film more. I guess there's a feeling of not wanting to get left behind by progress or something, but the authority of the light meter, the authority of the DP on set being really the only person who really knows how it's going to turn out, that speeds the process, that keeps, you know, your eye with authority where it needs to be in collaboration with the director. It stops everybody looking over your shoulder and saying, "Ooh, that's too bright, that's too dark," or whatever. I mean, it's a very very valuable thing for DPs. I'm surprised they haven't defended it more.
I think that there's a fear of, you know, both. Ultimately, as a DP, it's our job to also be adjustable and to be, you know, not every medium's right for every story. To the extent that if we're saying, you know, digital is watercolor and film is oil painting or vice versa, like, you know, for some things watercolor is better. I'm not saying, and certainly for me, you know, I need to be able to sort of roll with the different, I mean, constraints of a project regardless, but also there are occasions where I have found that digital can work to our advantage, specifically if you have a ton of improv, if you have, you know, child actors, if you have things, in our case where we don't have the budget to keep shooting, you know, occasionally it's more important to have the ability to get, you know, more takes. And so that always becomes part of the decision. But I think as a DP, to say I can only shoot on film would mean that I was getting, you know, 1/10 the phone calls that I get right now, and I can't afford to do that. So there you go.
Yeah, my cinematographer who shot all 4 of my movies on 16 or Super 16 for a while, people always say, like, I always say, you should hire him for their movie. And they say, well, we're not going to shoot on film. I say, he's not just the film. Like, he can do whatever.
Right.
But he would be really excited if you had that in the budget. But yeah, there's like this fear of being pigeonholed. But you said when we spoke that, you know, like, you feel like people say, oh, like, because you're going to shoot on film, like, as though that's your thing, and they don't want to.
Well, the problem, yeah, I mean, the studio system has a wonderful ability to sort of patronize filmmakers. It has a wonderful ability to absorb. It's sort of what you were talking about with the Raptors and the motorbikes. It's a tricky point, I think, for people to understand, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like whatever, you know, whatever's outside the mainstream or seems like a crazy idea or whatever, if it works, it just gets absorbed in. And the way that happens with film at the moment is it sort of becomes like, oh, it's your thing, or oh, it's, you know, but it's not for everybody. Having said which, I mean, I think the way that the studios rallied together in support of Kodak a couple of years ago to really keep film going was incredible. And
which you spearheaded, and
with a lot of different filmmakers of all different stripes. I mean, obviously there's, you know, Quentin and JJ and people like that, but also Judd Apatow is a big force. A lot of different filmmakers coming together to do that, and a lot of studios, all the studios, really being very, very supportive, which was wonderful to see. But the danger is that if it's the same voices continually talking about, yeah, you stop being heard.
And it's your guys' fetish, and everyone just says they're just these guys who don't want to adapt. And yeah, I mean, when you mentioned that Judd Apatow kind of joined the cause, you know, saying he wants to shoot a different kind of movie that way, I think that does a lot.
Oh yeah.
For the kind of argument that I hope we can, you know, address here.
But don't those comedies feel like they have weight? Like those comedies feel like they happened. There's something different about Judd Apatow's movies that he shoots on film. There's an authority to them. Yeah. That, you know, they don't just fly away. Like they don't just disappear.
27% funnier.
We have the number.
We have the number. 27%.
But there is a danger, though, I think, of it turning into like, you know, it's vinyl. Like we're just a bunch of people who need to hear it on vinyl because it sounds better, and it's not that. It's not just that.
Come back.
Vinyl's come back
in a very small way, but that's what we talked about.
No, in a very, very big way, actually. For the record, it's a huge,
literally for the record,
huge turnaround. And but I don't like making the comparison. It's comforting to those of us who want to explain to people that, as I said, it's not about technical progress or interfering with technical progress. It's about recognizing distinct and useful media. But you're talking about a consumer format. There's no reason on earth that the audience should give two hoots what's in the booth projected. What they should care about is what's up on screen. It's our responsibility as filmmakers to fight for the right thing to be in the booth so that we give the audience the experience they want. Somehow the corporate interests around the issue have managed to make it some kind of consumer advocacy issue or something in terms of, you know, the consumer should care that the film has been shot on an iPhone or shot. Like, why? A story is a story, a movie is a movie. What we should care about is what's up there on screen, not how it's made.
I'll make this one last point, and then we can go to questions. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying with the diversity of voices who want to use this as their medium, there is a connection in between the Jurassic World, Interstellar, Star Wars films, and then our size movies, which is just that if you guys are fighting for something, then there is no hope for 20 years from now when you're slowing down or, you know, fine. You're never going to slow down. Oh. But you know what? You have to build something. You have to build something that lasts right now.
Ridley Scott's 78. Okay, so I got my eyes.
Was Exodus shot on film?
No,
He doesn't shoot.
He's way out. He's out.
No. I mean, he loves his digital. He loves 3D particularly.
Yeah, I know. So I mean, so why are we talking about it?
Because he's a great filmmaker working in more than 20 years from where I'm going to be.
But you wouldn't want film to go away in your lifetime or at all. So
I don't ever want it to go away.
We have to build the next.
Well, the culture can't ever afford to lose a medium. You can't afford to lose bronze casting. You can't afford to lose marble sculpture. These things are going to have massive importance for future generations, one way or another. And so, it's not even an option for it to go away. The problem right now is ensuring that it doesn't go away temporarily, or that it isn't, as you say, it doesn't become an elitist thing whereby newer filmmakers don't feel they're not engaged with that choice, that they could make something that way.
That's what I was trying.
That's what's
well, a little bit of that falls on all of us too, because I think that there isn't a farm system in Hollywood. Like we are responsible for helping to find the next generation and bring them to the fore. And I think in that process, it is a bit of our responsibility, especially if the film schools aren't doing it, to if you have a filmmaker who you're mentoring or in that we all help each other, try to show the benefits of this and why this is a choice that we've all made, and I think it's good to evangelize a little bit and create disciples for this, because how else is it going to happen? I mean, you also have, personally, I think the biggest affront to the way that general audiences perceive movies is the alteration of the frame rate on their televisions.
Yeah.
And motion smoothing is the worst thing to happen to movies in recent history. And I guess a lot of people know what that means, but for those who don't, if you're watching at home, a lot of major television companies, the default on the television when they give it to you has a frame rate that actually inserts additional somehow digitally manufactured frames into your 24 frames a second, and it makes everything look like you're watching a Spanish soap opera. Yeah. Even the coolest, and it's terrible.
It's terrible. And I didn't want to bring it up because it's too complicated an issue, but as you get into things like high frame rates or whatever things that are going to happen in the future, the problem is if we don't establish the principle right now that the filmmaker should be determining how the film is shown, how the film is acquired, how the film is shown, which has always been filmmakers' right, then as things get more and more disparate in terms of what people like, what people don't like, things like high frame rate that some people like, some people just are absolutely allergic to it and would never want the film to be seen that way. We have to be able to have control of that. We have to be able to talk to the TV companies and say the default setting needs to be for 24 frames, playback, not a sort of interpolated 48 or 60 or whatever. It's not just about celluloid. It's about the rights of filmmakers. I mean, literally, the rights to be able to determine, what the form, what the medium is that they're working in.
I will say one thing that I was able to do on this front is, for Jurassic, we had a partnership with Samsung where they were going to show some footage from the movie a couple weeks in all the Best Buys. On the Samsung TVs, they were going to be showing footage that no one could see, so you could go into Best Buy and see it. And I said the only way I'll do this is if at the Best Buy they all have to calibrate it to not have the motion smoothing on if they're going to watch the movie. And around the country, and I went to many Best Buys to make sure this was happening. And they did.
Did you talk to them about changing the default setting? Because that would be the best. Is get them to change.
It is. I think that I'm as vocal as it, and the Samsung was a partner on that film, and I was pretty vocal about it to everybody that I could talk to. I'm not really sure who benefits from it being the default. I don't know.
People prefer to watch sports.
But can't you just have a button
for movies?
Have it be that, and then have a sports button. Have it the other way around if you want to watch a football game. I agree.
Tell them they can't show Star Wars on Samsung TVs unless they're
tell them they can't have Star Wars at all unless they stop this, and then I think that'll fix things really quick.
I don't see what the. You got to be careful. I don't see what the upside is.
One of my dear friends, who's also a DP, Reed Moreno, actually started a petition to basically stop motion interpolation as the default. So everybody go sign her petition.
Absolutely. Where it's online.
I think it's online. Yeah.
And go, and I'll say this on behalf of Ryan Johnson, who is has a whole campaign about this as well. Go to your parents' house. Go to your grandparents' house. When you go over Thanksgiving. Fix their tie. I remember going home to my dad. It's my dad's birthday today. Happy birthday! I think he's watching. My dad's 70 today. For Dad. Happy birthday, Dad. You walk in and he's watching Man on Fire or something. I'm like, what the hell, what's going on, man? And I just immediately go and fix it. So please, just walk into strangers' houses, knock on their doors.
Well,
Every
most
Airbnb
importantly,
you ever stay in.
don't let any kids watch it that way, because what we can't have is a generation of kids growing up who don't know what a movie's supposed to look like. Absolutely. And that's the danger. And filmmakers have to have that power.
All right, well, I guess we can go to questions for the remainder, and I'll repeat them, or if they're not good, I will just go to another one. Is it up to me to point at people? I saw that guy in the hat right there first, with the pom-pom. No, you're the only one with the pom-pom on.
Hi, thank you, all three of you, for coming here. What do you imagine movie theaters are going to be different 20 years from now? What do you think is the biggest thing that's going to change in auditoriums?
Good question.
Sorry. I don't need to repeat it. You had a microphone. All right.
No, I mean, yeah, that's a difficult thing. That's a game that the studios are often trying to play. My fear is that the biggest thing that'll be different is there'll be no booth at all, and there'll be a satellite, feed of the film that's compressed in some way that filmmakers haven't been allowed to consult on. And that's one of the reasons we're trying to fight a lot of these fights now, so that we can have a voice in that. My hope, though, is that the screens are going to be bigger, the seating's going to be better, and the premium idea of the experience is going to be enhanced. And I think there will be film projectors in the best theaters. I really do. I mean, that's my hope and my belief. I'm old enough to have lived through the first era of multiplexing that was horrendous, where they would take a big theater like this one and just kind of put a couple of walls up and make these little boxes. And that was very, very damaging to the health of movies, and the rise of home video came along, and eventually the multiplexes that were built in the 90s were fantastic and so much better thought through. So I'm hopeful that, as the distinction needs to be made from home entertainment, the theaters get better and better.
And I think it's turning into a more social experience. People are offering drinking plus 21 theaters and dinner theaters and things like that to encourage people to really make a night of it, and also to converse, which is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the communal experience of watching a movie with a group. I also, one place where I'm a proponent of digital is being able to spread that out into events and into sports. I mean, one of the coolest experiences I've had in a theater is watching the World Cup with 500 people, and everyone was just going crazy and talking and throwing popcorn at each other, and it was just awesome. And I think that's actually one place where digital distribution can help movies in a certain way, because anytime you have a great experience in a theater, you remember why you ever did that in the first place, as opposed to sitting at home and watching it on TV. And I think, one of the reasons why I think our movie did well is because it provided an opportunity for large groups of people to get together and scream and yell and cheer, and all of those reasons that we go to the movie. And it is kind of an addictive thing, and film aside. So I think that whatever we can do to keep the movie houses alive, and not have it turn into, even with film projection, not have it turn into, well, my parents go to the opera, but I don't go to the opera anymore. Make sure young kids go to the opera, and make sure that we have. I don't have it. Saved and Not Guaranteed was the last movie to show on film in Burlington, Vermont, where I live, and they went digital, and it was a bummer. But my kid can't go watch film where I live. That's not an option for us. We'd have to probably drive to New York, and they're just barely. I mean, even the Ziegfeld's shutting down. Today?
Yeah, today's the last. Today Thursday?
Man.
Yeah, today's the last day for the Ziegfeld. I read online. Where I saw several movies in 70 millimeter in the last few years. And saw Gone with the Wind there on 35.
Now I'm all bummed.
Yeah, should we?
Can I just add one thing to that, which is that I think the trick is people will go to the theater to see dinosaurs. It's getting people to go to the theater to see more intimate, more sort of dramatic, kind of smaller movies. And but I think if you look at what Todd Haynes and Ed Lachman did with Carol, I mean, everybody that myself included, that saw that movie said, go see it in a theater. Mm-hmm. And I think that really sort of changed the experience of watching that movie. The second you see a drama at home, the phone rings, you get a text, it takes you out of it.
But one of the things that's going on there that has to be spoken about is if the films are acquired digitally, if they're presented digitally, the distinction for the audience between what they can see on their great equipment at home and what's in the cinema is much, much smaller than when film is involved at either end of the chain. And that is damaging movies. I mean, it has to be addressed. I mean, we need movie theaters to be providing an experience that you can't get at home. And that's why I'm actually optimistic about what the quality of those theaters is going to be in 20 years, because that's the economic imperative. They're going to have to get better and better as home entertainment systems have got better and better.
Or make really good drinks.
Exactly.
Where's the nearest microphone, Spike? All right, well, we'll pick that guy there with the hat because the microphone lady wants him to ask a question.
Hello, 1, 2. Yeah, my question is actually directed to Mr. Nolan. My name is Casey. Hello. So your films, they reflect a high level of intelligence, and I wonder, you collaborate with your brother as well a lot. So could you give a brief rundown of the process of your stories and their creation?
I mean, it's so different on each film. I wouldn't want to get too bogged down in it at the expense of the real subject of the panel, but every film's been different in the way in which we approach it, where sometimes I'm writing on my own, sometimes I'm writing from something with my brother or David Goy or other collaborators I've worked with. But it's probably too long an answer for this panel.
So if anyone has a question about film, we'll point to you now. Yeah, let's think. I can't really see anybody. How about this guy here in the black hoodie and the glasses?
Hello, thank you for coming out today. My question is actually more in relation to piracy. Do you see film projection as a good way to sort of combat the piracy? Like if people feel like they need to see a film in the theater, is that better than just downloading it to their phone? And
Absolutely.
Can we use that to convince people to
shoot on film? I mean, as far as arguments go, I mean, yes, anything that makes the film experience in public more distinct from what you can get at home helps. And you know, for the record, if you take a 70mm IMAX print, if somebody can figure out how to pirate that, good luck to them. You know, it's like my films come on 44 reels. Each reel's this big, and it has to be. I mean, you know, you can't pirate it with any efficiency or whatever. So it is much more easy these days to protect your material and keep it. You know, keep it private until it's ready to go out to the world. Yeah, absolutely.
I do think if you're willing to watch a pirated movie on your computer, you're probably the most difficult convert that we could ever reach, imaginable. Like you're not putting you know, exhibition quality at the top of your list of priorities.
It is amazing how far piracy has come in our lifetime from video cameras in the movie theater. Yeah. So let's give them their credit. The pirates have adapted as well. Yeah. By stopping bringing camcorders into a movie theater. At least you don't see that anymore.
Oh, you do. That's how they pirate my films. Because you
can't get them up, because that's it.
Exactly.
So I can download a pirated video cam of a 70mm Interstellar.
Probably.
Yeah.
With somebody's head in them.
Yeah.
Although it does, like, you know, as far as the democratization of making films, you do approach it with a very different attitude. You know, when Safety Not Guaranteed came out, all I cared about is people watching it. I wasn't really thinking about piracy, like pirate it, whatever, just watch my movie, please. And you know, when it's on Netflix, you know, all of those things are a great benefit. And I think once you see the level of just blood, sweat, and tears that goes into making, you know, any film, but especially, you know, these larger films, people work so hard and they leave their families behind, and it is difficult. And so to me, there's a great disrespect in deciding, you know, I'm just going to throw this in my computer and then text while I watch it.
Yeah, I don't know how to even get stuff like that. People say, oh, the movie leaked, and I say, I don't know how that works.
Where do you find that?
I don't know how that stuff works at all. It's beyond my comprehension of technology. Are there any women who want to ask questions? Oh, there's one right there on the aisle.
Thank you all for coming. My question's kind of related to an earlier question about the future of film. One of the things at Sundance, down at New Frontier, there's a lot of VR stuff going on. It's seeming to become more and more popular over the years. So I was just wondering what you guys think about that, and if any of you ever see yourself making anything in a VR format.
I mean, I can jump on that because I actually just started to collaborate with Chris Milk on some VR stuff. I think VR should be looked at as a tool, just like, you know, the same way we're sort of saying that if, you know, digital is what I say, watercolor, film is oil, VR is you know,
Photoshop.
pastel. It's a whole different medium.
Sculpture.
But it's its own medium, and it serves certain things really well. And I think it's just we're sort of fighting for is more choices. And so I don't think VR takes away from, either of...
No, not at all. And one of the benefits of being old enough that I only have 20 years left is...
Boy. Boy, do I'm never going to not regret that.
That's fine. I've lived through the first wave of VR. I've lived through 2 waves of 3D. The thing you have to look at is virtual reality, if it's coming along as it's supposed to be now, and I've seen some impressive demos, it'll be its own medium. And I never get asked anymore, oh, do you think video games are going to kill movies? 10 years ago, I was being asked that all the time. It's like, no, they're completely different media. It's wonderful to have a new medium. It's extremely exciting. And I certainly wouldn't rule out working in it on a particular project. But it's not in opposition to the status quo. It's additive, I think.
Where's the nearest microphone? All right, you're very good at picking people for us. Yeah, just float it in there.
Hi. Thank you, all 4 of you. I think you guys all are an excellent example of storytelling that has patience, and I think that's connected a little bit to this medium that we're talking about. So I'm somebody that's right now kind of on the front lines. I'm teaching 13-year-old kids in an after-school program about cinema. And so maybe connected to that, I just want to get your advice on what is the thing if I am having to make the compromise and have them shoot digitally, what's the thing that can give them a little bit of insight into maybe a storytelling process that transitions them to really appreciate the medium of film, and is it film history, is it cinematic language, just something along those lines.
I would say before you have them shoot video, give them a still film camera and have them shoot 24 films and tell a story that way. At least is the first step. If you can tell a story with 24 still frames, then you can start telling bigger stories. That would be my suggestion.
I think that's a great suggestion because it changes the thinking. I mean, the problem, we talked a little bit about it earlier on when we talked about Video Village, because the thing you fight with the increase in video technology on sets, the thing you fight is your collaborators viewing it as a two-dimensional medium. So they look at the image as two-dimensional. I sit by the camera, I don't look at a video just to sort of watch the actors. And so there's a lot of thought that immediately puts into your collaboration with the DP about camera placement, for example, about not just putting on a longer lens and not moving the camera. You sort of start to understand the proximity of the camera creating a different effect and so forth. And it's very difficult to explain that if all kids are ever seeing is the immediate 2D translation. So that they're one of the problems with a lot of video technology now is it doesn't have a viewfinder. So it's all on screens. And to harp on a theme, if you're as old as I am, it means you start putting reading glasses on, which is a pain in the ass. You don't do that with a viewfinder. But it creates a different kind of thinking. You're looking at a picture the whole time. Instead of with a camera you're looking through, you're much more in the space. You're much more connected with the three-dimensional nature of what it is you're creating. And all of the progress in film history, all of that great continuum that we get to tap into now as filmmakers in 2016, it's all about figuring out how to translate the three-dimensional storytelling onto a screen that people can watch. And that's a difficult thing to get across to kids. But I mean, we were joking about it earlier. I think a very important thing to do is make sure that whatever you're showing them of film history is being shown at the right frame rate. It's a real issue. It's like, we made a joke of it, but it's very important that kids are seeing what films are supposed to look like, in the past to understand film history. Now, if they then want to change that and advance that and move that, terrific, but understanding where it's come from. And, I grew up, when I was a kid, silent films were always projected at 24 frames a second incorrectly on television. So we all grew up thinking that Charlie Chaplin walked too fast, And then Kevin Brownlow came along and was like, no, you idiots. They were shot at 18 frames a second. You have to transfer them at 18 frames a second. And now you get a Blu-ray of a great silent film like City Lights or something, and you see it the way it was supposed to look. And it's very important for kids trying to absorb film history that they're shown it in the right way.
Yeah, I agree. Rachel and I were talking about this earlier, just the value of not, I would show my kids Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd and just be able to see, just physical comedy at a very young age, how they can perceive it, but also just, all the technology aside, just talking about, the nature of storytelling in a way that kids can understand. When I went to NYU, I focused almost entirely on writing and learning how to tell a story, and with my son and my daughter, as they're starting to write stories, we talk about in a way that the kid can understand. You have a river, and there's many stones across the river. In order to get to the other side, you step on this stone and this stone and this stone, and each one of those stones is a part of your story. And I think to be able to instill that in them and have them understand it on a fundamental level will make a huge difference in their ability to take what's in their brain and communicate it into a medium of any kind.
All right, I think it's like time for 2 more. You're in the middle. You seem to have a microphone.
Hello.
Is someone already asking a question? Oh.
Hello. Hi.
Wait,
over here? No?
I have no idea where this question's coming from.
It's over here.
Over here doesn't help.
Sorry.
And then we're going to go with this child here, I think was the last question.
Oh, man, I beat out a child. I apologize.
So set it up for him, and then
I was super aggressive about being able to say something, because I want to thank all of you, and I just wanted to let you know that because of Lorette Bale from Kodak, who's in the room, we premiered my film, Outlaws and Angels, which was shot for way less than $1 million on a film print on Monday night. And it was a magical experience being able to project on film. We're going to be playing here tonight. It won't be a film print, but it still looks beautiful. We shot on 35. And I just wanted to say thank you, because I don't think it's an old thing or a young thing, really. I got in a huge argument with William Friedkin about film versus digital, and he got really irate and said that Kodak was closed. So I think a lot of people who are a lot older are getting out of touch and thinking that film isn't great. But you do have disciples, all of you up there. Me and a lot of the up-and-coming guys who have shot films recently are huge proponents of film. We're purists, and we want to keep capturing on the best medium possible. And I don't think it would be possible if it weren't for big guys like you out there fighting for film. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to say please, my question to you that you can't answer is will you please never stop? Because a lot of these guys, you'll hear fighting for film, and then a couple years later they change their mind. David Lynch kind of went back and forth. He's shooting film again, which is great. But I just wanted to tell you, film's a very emotional thing for me. I'm passionate about it, and I'm fighting with a huge group of people in the trenches who are just coming up to keep shooting film. So thank you, and thank you again.
Yeah, I can promise one thing. There's a lab in Rochester where Kodak is making. It's the last lab that is making film here in America. And if it were to ever close, I promise. I mean, we'll take a selfie for you, but we'll be out there in front on the lines, either trying to stop it or at least buying up every last reel. But that would be a truly tragic thing. And I don't mean to, use hyperbole in saying the word tragic, but there is one town in this country that has a lab, that has a factory that is manufacturing film. And one of the biggest problems, and the reason why Kodak has struggled so much, is that most of their profit came from making film prints. It's not from making the film that we all shoot on. And so the loss of that avenue of exhibition has created a company who is doing everything within their power to keep manufacturing film long into the future. And so whatever all of us can do, and I know anyone who loves movies can do, will definitely be a very beneficial thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is part of what's become interesting, and you mentioned this, that directors like Friedkin and people like that, when they restore their films, they want them on DCP. And they say, this is the definitive way to see it. This is how I always wanted it to look.
Well, no, I mean...
Makes no sense.
But you're generalizing. I mean, and this is one of the problems. That's true for a handful of people.
Who get they get press for it.
Yeah, exactly. Or, it can seem current or whatever. There are plenty of filmmakers, some of whom aren't around anymore to advocate for themselves, some of whom are, but for whom that's not true. And the DCP is only ever going to be, if you've shot your film on film, and that's the way it existed, some great film of the past from some filmmaker, the DCP is only ever going to be a translation, only ever going to be a slice. And that digital technology, one of the wonderful things about digital video technology is it advances continuously. And so whatever we just put out a Blu-ray of the Quay brothers films. We had to go back to the original films to remaster it because the video masters that were made in 2008, which were meant to last forever and whatever, the technology has moved on since then. The film is timeless, and the film can be, those films, when they need to be redone again at 4K, 8K, 12K, there'll be visible improvement in that presentation every time. And it's important to talk about. The digital version of it is only ever going to be a translation.
Yeah, and you're right. It does get picked up in the press when people, a few people make a lot of noise saying, this is how I always want it to look, and I don't want these scratchy, beat-up prints. And when there was a Friedkin retrospective in New York, and I went to both screenings of Sorcerer, because he said this is the last time this will ever play on 35 because the DCP is almost done. So I just said I need to see this twice because I'll never get to experience this thing again. And the print was so good. I mean, it just looked better than anything. And I don't ever want to see that movie on DCP or his restored Blu-ray. I want to buy that print so I can own it.
Well, and you can also just working as hard as you can to find ways to use film to create an experience that you can't capture anyone else. Here's a sentence that was actually said out loud, which will sound crazy. I asked the question, is it possible for us to shoot IMAX film plates in actual space for Star Wars? And I haven't gotten an answer yet, but I know that, they've shot IMAX in space.
Well, funny enough, we had that conversation on Interstellar.
Yeah, be crazy.
Well, the payload, blah, 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 and this, but no, you keep.
The questions are being asked.
Oh yeah, those cameras. You've probably seen the footage, but there's incredible footage from space with those film cameras, and there's nothing they could do now to.
I think we need you guys to figure that out before we can start shooting movies on location in outer space.
Sounds. I know it sounds.
Let's get the question from the child, and then that's the last one. I feel like this is going to be great.
No pressure.
So I'm Jameson Stagg, and I really want to become a filmmaker when I grow up. And I was just wondering, this is kind of just a general question, but do you have any sort of tips as far as story goes for young filmmakers like me?
Well, good question. You got that?
Sure, yeah. What is my answer is to, I know a lot of people tell you to watch a lot of movies, and that's important too. But don't forget to live a full life, and don't forget to travel, and don't forget to meet a lot of different people, and expose yourself to different perspectives and different ways of looking at the world, because we make movies for the whole world. Now it is an export that America has, and part of our responsibility is to not be sitting in the dark all the time, watching the world through the lenses of others, but to go out and live ourselves and have your heart broken and all those things that will make you a complete human being.
That's so eloquent. I really just watch movies. That's what I would have said. And read a lot.
I would just add two things. One is, you're never too young. You can start now. I think both. I was reading that, Chris, you started at 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And I was the same, more from a still photography perspective. But somebody just sent me a picture. Probably I couldn't have been older than 4 or 5, and I'm the only one not in the picture. And we figured out it was because I was the one taking the picture. So start now, but also, speak from your experience, and your experience as it grows will inform the work that you do.
The only thing I'd say is reading, very important, and getting to grips with the written word, because you get into filmmaking as a kid out of a love for the moving image and connecting a series of images, but there's a point where it starts to have to be about the words, because that's what's going to give you the framework to put those images to. And you sort of wind up having to be a writer. I never wanted to be a writer, and then you wind up having to be a writer because that's a part of your filmmaking process.
I think that Kodak should give this kid one of these new Super 8 cameras.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everybody. I think that's it for us. Thank you everybody, and thank you Sundance for asking us to do this, and Colin, Chris, Rachel.